In this video, we'll be going over getting workflow instance details using the endpoint provided by DL Freight. If we look at the API docs, we can see that the workflow instance detail endpoint requires a workflow ID and a tag ID. We can get these by navigating to the workflow of our choice. We'll go to this sample workflow, and we can see here in the URL our workflow ID. Now here we have multiple workflow instances, each with their own tag ID. So if we select any of these and hover over a tag ID, we can actually copy this to our clipboard as well. Now, just to show you a little bit about what kind of information we're going to be getting by hitting the endpoint, let's click on Show Asset Detail. So here we can see the tag ID up at the top. We can see that there are 5 carrier groups, each with their own asset details down here. We're going to be looking at the sample carrier admin since that's what we're signed in as for now. You can also see a timeline at the top, when this asset was created, when it was sent out, when it was received, and so on. So taking the workflow ID and the tag ID, we're going to navigate to Postman. In order to call any endpoint on DL Freight, we need to be authenticated. So first I'm going to generate a token using the authenticate endpoint. I've passed in my client ID and my client secret, which we got from a previous video. And I've generated my token. So I'm going to take this token and I'm going to navigate to the Get Workflow Instance Detail endpoint. Here I have the workflow ID from the URL, as well as the tag ID for this particular instance. In the header, I've passed in the token that we just generated. So I'm going to send this request. I'm collapsing this group asset details section to show you that each of these represents one of the 5 groups that we covered in the portal. We're signed in as the carrier admin, so we'll open this one. And here we can see information such as load ID. If we scroll down, we can see load service type. And if we were to keep going, we could also find spot rate and line haul rate. If we collapse this again and scroll down, we can see the IDs for each of the user groups. And if we keep going, we can see the timeline information that we covered as well. We can see if there are any disputes, whether the user I'm signed in as is the owner, and so on. As you may be guessing, you can see all the relevant information about this instance by using the Get Workflow Instance Detail endpoint.